Hey gang, Phil Goyette here. We're going to go over my prototype tabletop game, Empires of the Millennium. And hopefully these videos will help you kind of get rolling into the game until the rule book is ready. And today we're just going to go over the map. So this short video is going to go over the map, excuse me, and some basic concepts in there. So the map itself is based on this map from Al-Idrisi in the 12th century, which he compiled in the court of Roger II of Sicily, who was a Norman. And Al-Idrisi was hired by Roger to create this map and the geographical history that went along with the map. And he spent about 10 years on it, where he was paid for that whole time. He created the map, and this is 70 individual sections, so you can't really zoom in on this one. Oh, here we go. So each individual section, if we zoom in, is this level of detail. And if you put all 70 sections together, it was his map of the known world at the time. This is a copy of that map. It's not the original. None of the originals survived. I think this is a compilation of one of the oldest copies that does survive. And Idrisi also created plate in silver representing a tabula of the globe, and also had celestial features as well. And it was gigantic, and they had it in the court. That doesn't survive either, unfortunately. But so I took that and made the map for the game by just kind of drawing lines on top of it. So here's the game map, and you can see it's also just the sort of northwest corner of Idrisi's map. But here's the map that we play the game on, and the boundaries of the map is it kind of goes from Vinland here in the northwest corner, which is what the Vikings called North America when they landed, down into the Maghreb and Silja Massa in North Africa. And then on the southeast corner of the map is the Persian Gulf, and then Persia itself, Fars and Khorasan. And then you go up the Transoxus and the Caspian Sea. And then the northeast corner of the map is kind of the land of the Volga Bulgars, dumping in where the Volga dumps into the Caspian. So that's the extent of the map. And the map consists of different location types, some of which are playable as spaces and some which aren't. So the playable spaces are three types. And we'll start on Constantinople. That's a city. Excuse me. And you can see it's a city. It's got the hexagonal shape, and it's denoted as a city because it's an automatic victory location, which automatic victory chart is down here in the bottom right. We need to control cities for purposes of automatic victory. So that's a city location. It's a playable location. You can put your pieces there. Playable space. You can put your pieces in. And then next to Constantinople is Thracia. And this is a playable space as well. So you could put pieces there, which there should be to start. I don't know what happened to them. But, well, they went to Bulgaria for a vacation, I guess. So it's a province. So the irregular shaped spaces are all provinces. Thracia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Kherson. Okay. And there are some game actions which you can only do in provinces as opposed to cities, like taxing, for example. And then the third type of playable space is a line of communication. On this map, they're green, and they're generally rivers. So here's the Dnieper, here's the Don, here's the Danube, which is a big one. And they are playable spaces. So the neutral faction could move his cube onto the Danube, for example. They're generally rivers, but down in the Middle East, we've got two types of roads, two roads, same type. One is the Silk Roads, which lead to India. That's this green line here. And then the other is the Hajj route, which starts in Baghdad and then runs down to Al-Hiyaz and further on into Mecca, and then up along the Levant and the Dead Sea, and then up to Syria. That's all one line of communication, is the Hajj route. Each line of communication will have a number value and a little circle there. That is the economic value of the line of communication. What you can do is it's a playable space, so you can move a piece into the line of communication. and then it's adjacent to any other space that's adjacent to the line of communication. So instead of going through Naj, you can go around it, for example. The other thing it can do is you can control the line of communication. So right now we'll get this control marker as the Abbasids controlled the Hajj route. And then if you control it during the administration phase, at the end of the turn, you can administer that line of communication and gain the economic value of 3 for controlling it at that time. The other thing you can do with lines of communication is you can raid them. So raiding involves moving your piece and rolling d6 on this raid chart, which is over to the upper left side of the screen. And some of the options are you can gain 2 times. If you roll a 1, you gain 2 times the economic value of the location. That includes a line of communication. So you could raid the Hajj route, and if you roll a 1, gain $6 for raiding it. This did happen historically. The Hajj route was a major raiding target, actually. So that's how the 3 playable spaces work. And then there's 3 more features on the map that are not playable spaces, but they do impact gameplay. The first of these are seas. So we've got the Black Sea, the Caspian, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, the Aegean, Adriatic, Mediterranean, the North Atlantic, the North Sea, and the Baltic. How they impact gameplay is there are certain cards which allow you to do things in or adjacent to certain seas. So you need to, any location that has a coastline shared with the sea is adjacent to it. So Constantinople is adjacent to both the Black Sea and the Aegean, for example. So that's one game impact they have. The other is that the Norse faction have a special action called a voyage. And if they want to do the voyage special action, what it allows them to do is move across any naval routes, which I'll get to next, but that's these, in one sea area. So all these naval routes are going through the North Sea. They could move a cube onto each of these naval routes to voyage, right? But they couldn't move a cube there and then one on a route in the Baltic Sea because the voyage is limited to one sea area. Or you couldn't go from Northumbria to Ireland in that voyage because that's part of the North Atlantic Sea area, if that makes sense. Okay. So those are how sea areas work in the game, non-playable spaces, but they do impact the game in a few ways. And then you have naval routes, which are denoted. They're these orangish red lines, and they have a number value and a triangle. And how the naval route works is pieces can either, by conducting a naval raid, can either raid across the route or they can march across the route. So it confers adjacency between 2 locations for purposes of a naval raid or a march. However, the number is the naval value or the navigation value of the route. So you have to roll equal to or less than this number in order to get your cube across. So the Norse route from Scandinavia to Northumbria was pretty straightforward, and on a 5 or less, we'll roll a die. Oh, they roll a 6. On a 5 or less, this cube could make it across. However, we rolled a 6, so the cube is lost. You delete it. Okay, so that's how the naval routes work in the game. You can see to get to Iceland's a 4 or less, but then to get from Iceland to Greenland's a 3 or less, and then to discover Vinland's a 2 or less. So different routes have different values, which will impact your decision making on whether you want to use them for certain game functions. So those are how the naval routes work. And then the final area type are mountains. So we have the Pyrenees, Alps, the Carpathians, the Balkans, the Taurus, the Caucasus, and the empty quarters a desert area, but I just call it mountainous. Those locations are not playable, so you can't move in there, but they are adjacent, and there are some event cards that might trigger things like adjacent to the Caucasus or adjacent to the Balkans. So that would be their functions. They also break up the map in certain areas, like in the Pyrenees, breaks up Burgundy and the Spanish March. So you can't go directly from Burgundy to the Spanish March. You have to go around the Pyrenees there. So that's how the mountain areas work. And those are all the spaces that are on the map. So then each space on the map, I think we'll go to, we'll do Bulgaria to start with as our space. So that's a province, and then it has a name, Bulgaria, and then it has a number, which is its economic value, and then it'll have a letter, which is its communications value. Okay. The number, economic value, impacts, firstly, it impacts how much money you make during the income phase. So Bulgaria is worth $1 during income phase. Thracia is worth 2. Constantinople is worth 3. At the start of the game, the highest value is 3, which would be Constantinople. Egypt is a 3. Sicily is a 3. And there's one more I'm forgetting. Oh, Baghdad is a 3 value. Okay, those are your 3 values at the start. I say at the start because the economic value of locations can change either through the building action or through event cards that come up during the game. And so, for example, there's an Aglabid card that can come out in the first or second epoch, and that makes Ifriqiya a 2 economy, so it improves its economy by 1. And there's just a little marker you put down, boop, plop it on space. You know, Ifriqiya is a 2 until either that gets removed, but probably for the duration of the game. So you gain money for the economic value during the income phase of the end of epoch phase. But also you can gain money by raiding a location. So if the neutral Bulgars were going to raid into Thracia, the economic value of Thracia is a 2, and if they roll a 1 on the raid chart, they get double that amount. So they would get 4 money in the raid, in the successful raid, and the Byzantines, because they control the area, would lose 4 money. So that's the other way that the economic value impacts gameplay. Okay. Then you have a communications value, which represents the level of road, city, river development, mountain passes, those types of things in the location. And the more developed areas are A, like cities are all A: Constantinople, Jerusalem, Baghdad, Cairo, Cordoba, Rome. We all have A communications. A lot of the provinces are B's, and then the very wild provinces are C's. How the communications rating impacts gameplay is 2 ways. One, it impacts how many cubes you need in a location to subjugate there and reveal a cylinder or remove a revolt. So if Bulgaria is a B, then the Byzantines need 2 cubes to flip 1 cylinder when they subjugate there. If it's a C, like Hungary, they would need 1, 2, 3 cubes there to flip 1 cylinder. Okay? Because the C level means 3. It's more wild, it's more difficult to operate there. And A is 1-to-1. So revolts and cylinders are easiest to deal with when they're in the A developed locations. The other impact the communications value has on the game is when you fight a military campaign there. So let's say the Byzantines have marched into Bulgaria and are going to campaign against the neutral Bulgarians there. Even if the Byzantines win, because the communications level is a B, if they roll a 5 or 6 on their combat dice, they're going to lose a piece even if they win, right? And the idea is that the worse the communications level of a region is, the more likely your troops are to suffer attrition while campaigning there, even if you win. So it's more dangerous to campaign in a C where you have a 50-50 chance of losing a cube versus in an A where you only have a 1 in 6 chance. So that's how the communications levels impact the game. Like economic values, they can be improved through event cards or through building actions. So Moravia, for example, could bump up its communications to a B if you wanted to invest in it. Okay, so that is how economic value and communications value work. Now let's review control of an area. And a good one to start with is Syria. Okay, so each location So each playable location, so province, city, or line of communications, can be controlled by no one or controlled by one faction only. Those are the two options. To control location, you have to have more pieces there than all the other faction pieces combined. So you need to have the majority of pieces in the area. In Syria right now, the Umayyads, this is their control marker there, control Syria because they have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces versus the one Abbasid cylinder and the one Byzantine cylinder. Okay. But let's say the Abbasids march in 1, 2 cubes from Al Jazeera to Syria. Now Umayyads have 4 pieces, and then there are 4 other pieces. So now the Umayyads don't have a majority of pieces in Syria, and they lose control. Syria is uncontrolled at this moment. If the Abbasids were to march in another piece, still uncontrolled, because the Abbasids have 4, the Umayyads have 4, and the Byzantines have 1. So that one Byzantine piece is holding things up now, right? And then if the Abbasids march in a 5th piece, they still don't have control because we've got 5 on each side. And then if they were to march in the 6th piece, they finally control Syria. Okay. Now, if the either Umayyad or Byzantine or both march into Syria, it's going to go back to uncontrolled. So that's how area control works. So each area's got a controlled status of either controlled by a faction or uncontrolled. And then each area also has a religious majority. So that is these white counters. The crescent and star is a Muslim counter, for example. The Christian cross is a Christian counter, and then you've got different flavors of Christianity, Orthodox or Latin. And then you've got, in Bulgaria, for example, pagan majority religion. Using Syria as an example, because it has no religious marker right now, its status as its religion is mixed. Okay? From the mixed religious status, the Byzantines can do missions there. And if they do a mission, they activate their cylinder and they move Syria from mixed to Christian. Okay. And then if they had that cylinder reset, they could do another mission there, which would move it from Christian to Orthodox Christian. Byzantines want Orthodox Christian followers as their victory goal, so they need to push it all the way to that end of the spectrum. Now, for let's say there's some wild Frank religious zealot that moves to Syria, he's going to flip. He would move it away from Orthodoxy and back to Christianity. Okay, and then the Franks can move it from, if they flip again, Christianity to Latin Christianity. That's the Christian side of the spectrum. If we go back to mixed and the Muslim factions want to start Dawa and using their missionary activity to change it toward Muslim, they flip, and from mixed it would go to Muslim. Okay. Later in the game, they can also, the green Fatimid faction and the black Sunni faction, black Abbasid faction, care about the Sunni and Shia split in religious followers. So this Muslim counter can actually change to either, if I can find it, Shia. So Syria can be Shia controlled or Sunni controlled. But it doesn't really come in until the last 2 turns of the game. So that's how religion works, moving from Christian to Muslim and back, and then to opposite ends of Christianity or Islam. But there's also this religious status of paganism. So we could have the pagans taking control of Syria, right? And the pagan marker sits on top of a region. So in order for any side to start moving the region on the religious influence, they need to do a mission to remove the pagan belief first. So you do a mission that deletes the pagan, then it becomes mixed. Then you can do another mission from mixed and flip it to Muslim. And then the Franks could flip it back to mixed. and then the Byzantines could come back in and flip it to Christian. So it's all malleable as the game progresses. Okay, each faction will be concerned with religious control in different ways at different points of the game, but it's something each faction will have to bear in mind while they play. So that's how the religious influence works in the regions. Next, we'll just look over a couple little weird adjacencies. So the Maghreb area is adjacent to Almasat, so you can march between North Africa and Spain. The Sicilia is adjacent to Calabria, so you can march back and forth between Sicily and Calabria. You can't march between Sicily and North Africa, however, until the Aghlabids. There is an event which allows it, though. But at the start of the game, you can't. And then the Norse and the Wendish marches up here are adjacent to each other. So the Norse can march overland into the land of the Wends if they want, instead of using the sea routes. So those are some just adjacency issues that have popped up. And then if you look in the southeast corner of the map, the Middle East is a little tight. But what you have is furthest east is the Transoxus region, which is, or province, which is adjacent to the Caspian Sea and is adjacent to Khorasan. Okay, and this orange is the area border between the two. Then you have Khorasan. Again, this is the orange area border of Khorasan, and that's adjacent to Fars and Transoxus and the Caspian and the Transcaucasus. And then you have Fars here, sort of like southwestern Persia, and Fars is adjacent to Aljazeera, Baghdad, Transcaucasus, Khorasan, Sawad, okay? And also the Hajj route runs through Fars and Khorasan both. So if you have a piece and it's also adjacent to Baghdad. So if you have a piece in Baghdad, Fars, or Khorasan, they can move directly onto the Hajj route, line of communication. Down in Najd, the Hajj route, this little black circle is where the Hajj route stops at Baghdad. So the Hajj route is adjacent to Baghdad, Sawad, Najd, the Empty Quarter, Al-Hiyaz, the Levant, and Syria. So a piece on the Hajj route is adjacent to all those locations. And then the Euphrates starts, the Hajj route that ends into the Euphrates here. The Euphrates continues through Sawad to the Persian Gulf, and then runs up adjacent to Syria, Aljazeera, Cilicia, and then it stops here at Armenia. Tigris is on the eastern side of Baghdad, adjacent to Fars, Transcaucasus, Aljazeera, and Armenia, and Cilicia. Okay, so geography is tight in that region, and there's a lot of nuance to it when you're playing the game. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to talk about on the map are the Papacy tracks and the Caliphate tracks. And the Papacy track we'll start with is adjacent to Rome. So the Frankish faction has control of the Papacy right now, and then the Papacy itself is in the neutral status on the tracker. The Franks generally want the Papacy aligned with them. They want Charlemagne crowned Holy Roman Emperor, for example. This would make the Papacy both Frankish and aligned through event play. Okay, so event cards can move this disc around, or because the Papacy is adjacent to Rome, and the Franks should have a cylinder in Rome, they can send an emissary from Rome to the Papacy. Okay, you can also send, or march from Rome to the Papacy. You can also use the emissary action to send an emissary from any city. So Jerusalem, Baghdad, Cairo, Constantinople. So let's say the Umayyads wanted to send an emissary to the Papacy. They can use their emissary action to move from one city directly to the Papacy itself. Once you're on the Papacy track, your piece stays there, okay, until they march back or do an emissary and leave. So you could have a Frankish piece and a Umayyad piece and a neutral piece all on the Papacy, right? And then by doing mission actions, say the Franks do a mission, they can move the disc around. So they will be stumping at the Lateran to move the papacy in alignment with themselves. And then you might have a neutral faction there, which would be like the uh, Roman oligarchs who maybe want the papacy for themselves. So they might push it back toward neutral. And then the Umayyad player might want to just do some intriguing to make life harder on the Frank player because they're in a good position. So they can move the papacy itself to crisis, which would still be Frankish. But now, say the papacy's in crisis and everybody's been reset and it's a new turn. Now that local Roman faction can intrigue against the papacy and kidnap, depose the Pope, install an anti-Pope, and create a neutral disc there instead of a blue one. Okay, and then that neutral disc can move around, or the Franks can flip and then move the disc back into Frankish control. So that's how the papacy track works. The Caliphate track works the same way. The Caliphate starts down here in the bottom right. It starts in Syria. I'll have a marker that'll show where the Caliphal capital is so we can keep track of it. Caliphate starts located in Syria. This is it here, this disc. It's the Umayyad Mosque of Damascus. But once the Abbasids are in control of Syria, they take the Caliphate and move it to Baghdad, where it becomes an assertive and Abbasid Caliphate. Okay. Same deal with the papacy. Pieces in the location of the Caliphate. So right now, say it's in Syria, these pieces could march here, or you could send emissaries from cities there. And then once on the Caliphate track itself, they can do actions to flip and push the disc around, or change the disc when it's in crisis to neutral or a different faction. So later in the game, the Fatimids want the Caliphate for themselves, and the Umayyads are interested in getting the Caliphate back for themselves. So in crisis, you could have, Umayyad Caliphate again. And then if the Umayyads have the Caliphate and also control Baghdad, then they can move it to either Cairo or Cordoba if they'd like. Move the physical location of the Caliphate. So it's a little more involved than the papacy track, but both are just there to show how the different empires of the time interacted with the religious overlords of the time, and how it wasn't necessarily purely a relationship of either the empire controlling the papacy or the papacy controlling the empire. For example, there was back and forth, and the situation evolved over the centuries that we're looking at. So I'm going to cut that here. This is an overview of the map. Hopefully this gives you guys some like a starting point to get going on the game. And then I'll make some more videos like this with the different factions or whatnot, so we can kind of see whether that helps people get into playing the thing until the rule book's ready. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoy.